the 9-bed maximum. Would recognize Councillor McMullen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reason I brought this forward is the CBRM land use bylaw permits supportive housing to a maximum of 9 beds currently, which I completely agree with and was thrilled when that was actually brought into our land use. However, there's been some confusion, at least on my part, that permission to increase that number may be permitted subject to provisions of site plan approval by the development officer, with no input from council or outside department staff. So to be clear, there is absolutely no limit to the number of beds exceeding the 9 if the site plan meets the criteria as approved by the development officer. I was made aware of this when I was copied on a response to a resident in regards to one of these housing units. The decision to grant site plan approval is based solely on the site plan's compliance with the criteria for site plan approval, i.e. parking, screening, ingress, egress of parking area, existing vegetation, etc. Appeals must relate specifically to those criteria, not to the broader question of whether the land use itself is appropriate. My question is, if that's the case, who addresses the broader question of whether the land use itself is appropriate to permit occupancy outside of that maximum 9? I believe this was an oversight in the development of the land use bylaw, allowing development officer the ability to grant approval for increased capacity based solely on parking, vegetation, etc., with no consideration to the appropriation of the type of supports and logistics of the surrounding area. In my opinion, this is a disservice to residents and it needs to be rectified. So the outcome I'm looking for is that council and senior staff input be required on all applications for supportive housing looking to exceed the 9-bed maximum. So the motion I'm putting forward for council to consider is that before further supporting housing applications in excess of 9 beds are considered, an amendment be drafted and brought back to council for CBRM land use bylaw to include council and senior staff input when an application is made to expand beyond the maximum of 9 beds. And I'd like to move that.
It's moved by Councillor McMullen, seconded by Councillor Gordon MacDonald. On the motion,
I'd like to speak to the motion if I could as well.
Yep.
So I can't stress enough how important supportive housing is in the community. I have no issue with the supporting housing. I know supportive housing is a very broad umbrella of these supports that can be offered to individuals. I understand that it's important to be included. I know that community is really, really, really big in anybody that's trying to reintegrate back. You understand that I am fully in support of the supportive housing. When CBRM Forward began, it was noted by then Director Roos and Senior Planner Karen Neville that this was going to be a living document. Because it was so broad, we were bound to come across things that perhaps maybe they didn't fit just right or they have to be tweaked just a little bit. And I believe that's what we had found, what I have come across here. My biggest concern is because I said, like as I mentioned, supportive housing is very broad. So there's different types and there's different supports. I believe that when it comes to the community around it, depending on, there has to be a broader conversation. As this reads right now in our land use bylaw, supportive housing shall be limited to a maximum of 9 beds. Then in B, it says, notwithstanding subsection A, supportive housing in excess of 9 beds may be permitted by site plan approval in accordance with the following. It's misleading. There is no maximum of 9 beds. Right now, the decision on how many beds are in a supportive housing unit is determined by the site plan. So I don't know why we have 9 beds. If the site plan can accommodate more, it not may will be, it will be. I've had the conversation with the planning department. If it meets all criteria, vegetation, setbacks, easements, all those good things, then it is granted. The type of housing is not discussed, and therefore I feel what we are doing is we are removing, because council can't discuss anything outside of that, therefore we can't speak on behalf of our residents. Our residents are not allowed to appeal based on the type of housing, and I'm not talking supportive housing in general. The maximum 9 is standard. I'm talking in excess of that only. So we have really removed the voices of our residents. They have no voice in the matter, nor does council. This decision is solely made. So I'll use an example of, say, an existing building. Doesn't matter the neighborhood, like it might be little, whatever the neighborhood looks like, 9 beds maximum. Okay, they move in. Well, this building, maybe it can accommodate 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. The decision of how many people are going in that building is made solely by the development officer if it meets the requirements of the site plan, with no input from residents or council. So I do believe that was simply an oversight, and that's what I'd like to see corrected. And that's all I have right now.